Fall is a time for comfort. Cozy sweaters, crackling fires, and pumpkin spice. But as leaves darken and skies turn gray, something stirs in the shadows, a chill beyond the crisp autumn air. Tonight, you'll hear 3 tales that might make you think twice about the safety of those autumn nights. These aren't just scary stories, they're real, disturbing encounters that happened in the fall season. So, if you're brave enough to continue, let's dive in. And remember, if these don't unsettle you, there's always our next collection of creepy, true arcade horror stories. Stay tuned for that. Story 1. The Haunted Campground. Our first story comes from a small campground in upstate New York, a perfect place to watch the leaves change. But not all that changes there is natural. It was late October, and a group of friends decided to escape the city noise for a weekend of camping under the stars. One of them, Jack, was an experienced camper, always the brave one who'd go on solo hikes to gather firewood. As the others set up camp, Jack ventured off into the quiet forest. But what he found was anything but peaceful. After about 30 minutes, Jack heard footsteps, heavy, dragging footsteps crunching through the dried leaves. He assumed it was one of his friends messing around, so he called out. Nothing, just the silence of the trees. Then, a whisper, faint and chilling. Jack, come find me. Now, here's the real question. Would you go toward that whisper? Or would you run the other way like you've got a marathon medal waiting for you? Jack, thinking it was a prank, walked closer, shining his flashlight around. He saw nothing until he looked up. There, tangled in the bare branches, was a tattered doll hanging by its neck, swaying in the breeze. Jack was no stranger to creepy woods, but this was different. Jack turned to run, but that whisper returned, louder this time. Jack, where are you going? He sprinted back to camp, only to find his friends, pale and shaking, huddled around the fire. They all heard it. That same voice, calling each of their names from different parts of the forest. They packed up in minutes and left, but Jack swears he still hears whispers in his dreams, calling him back. They say once the forest calls your name, it never stops. They left without looking back, but not everyone is that lucky. Our next story takes us to a small, secluded town where fall traditions turn into something sinister. Story 2. The Bonfire Ritual. This story unfolds in a tiny rural town in Pennsylvania, where fall is celebrated with an annual bonfire, a festival of light in the growing darkness. On the surface, it seemed innocent enough. Locals would gather around the largest bonfire you could imagine. But every fall, new rumors circulated, whispers of strange disappearances, names spoken around the fire that vanished from the town's registry by winter. Our storyteller, Claire, was a college student who visited for the festival. She was curious but cautious, keeping a safe distance from the flames. Then an older woman approached her, eyes glazed and almost empty. She said, "Don't look into the fire too long, dear. You might see someone looking back." Quick question, who's ready to skip any bonfires for the rest of the season? Just me. Ignoring the woman's warning, Claire's curiosity got the better of her. As she stared into the flames, she began to see faces, familiar yet twisted. Faces of people she thought she knew, friends, family members, staring right back at her from within the fire, their expressions desperate. It was as though they were trapped. Just as Claire blinked, a strong hand grabbed her shoulder. She spun around, but there was no one there. She glanced back at the fire, and every face had disappeared. That night she could hardly sleep, haunted by those familiar eyes. But the worst part? When she returned to her campus dorm, she realized one of her friends was missing. To this day, she can still hear whispers about that bonfire, calling her back. Chilling, right? But we're not done yet. Our last story dives into a college campus tradition gone horribly wrong. So let's set the scene. One crisp, quiet fall night on a dimly lit college quad. Story 3. The Late Night Library. There's something about libraries at night that's just unnerving. They're quiet, too quiet. And for our last storyteller, Evan, that quiet was only the beginning. It was mid-November, and finals were approaching. The library was nearly empty as students started to leave for the night. Evan stayed back, finishing up a late paper. As he typed, he felt that eerie sensation of being watched. He glanced up, seeing nothing, but couldn't shake the feeling. Then he noticed her. A girl, seated just across the room, watching him. Her face was obscured by her hair, but her stare was intense, unmoving. Evan tried to ignore her, but she never looked away. When he finally packed up, he went to leave, but something stopped him cold. The girl was gone. Or so he thought. At this point, it's just a universal horror rule. If someone's staring at you in an empty library, it's time to bail. As he reached the library exit, he saw her reflection in the glass door, standing right behind him, her face twisted and hollow, staring right into his eyes. He turned, but again, no one was there. Evan sprinted back to his dorm, but he couldn't shake her image from his mind. The next day, he asked around about the girl, and an older librarian pulled him aside. She said that years ago, a student had died in that library after being locked in overnight, and every year around the same time, she returns to find someone to keep her company. Evan transferred schools by the end of the semester, but even now, he says he still sees her reflection in windows from time to time, watching and waiting. Fall may bring crisp air and cozy nights, but as you've seen, there's a darkness that stirs when the days grow shorter. Whether in a forest, at a bonfire, or even on a quiet college campus, remember, what you can't see might be closer than you think. If you're ready to dive deeper into more spine-tingling tales, check out our next video on 3 really creepy true arcade horror stories. Just when you thought fall was scary enough, wait till you hear what lurks in the corners of those old arcades. Click on the screen to keep the chills going, if you dare.